we're going to cruise through my college football top 10 real quick. We do it every Wednesday. I got about 30 minutes left here in the show. Goal is to do this in about 10 to 12 minutes, and then we're going to finish off with Casey McAllister. He's got some buy or sells for us, and Casey and I are going to go back and forth on that. But let's do our CFB top 10. We do it every Wednesday here at the show. Andrew Collinsworth does a tremendous job with the graphic that we put up on our social media pages, by the way. That will go up on Twitter later today. Make sure you check that out. Big shout out to Andrew for making that happen. Not a ton of changes here in my top 10 this week. Do have a few subtle changes. We'll go 10 to 1. Again, kind of like the NFL, not very many changes in the NFL this week as it relates to my power rankings there as well. But the two teams right now on the outside looking in for me are BYU and Tennessee. Now, I understand BYU is undefeated, and I understand that there's a good chance BYU is still going to be undefeated by the time they roll in here to Nippert Stadium in a couple of weeks, and that's going to be a tremendous game. I'm just not fully sold on them yet, but a really impressive win from them last week against Iowa State, going on the road, I believe. By the way, they were underdogs in that game, so Vegas didn't even have belief in them that they could go in there and get the job done. But BYU is a good team. You know, they've been kind of reliant on coming back late in the fourth quarter. That's not, a consistent recipe that you can rely on, right, as a football team. But Bear Bachmeier, got to give him a ton of credit. True freshman quarterback. He's spinning it. Their offense coming alive here, scoring some points. They've been in some close games earlier in the season with some teams that they should have handled it a little bit more easily. But I think they're progressing week in and week out. And, I think at this point you can certainly make the argument they're the best team in the Big 12 as it relates to their perfect record here at this point. I still think Texas Tech's a good team, and I still think the Cincinnati Bearcats, I'm kind of all in. I won't say all in. I'm kind of in on Cincinnati after that win against Baylor. That's an impressive win. I understand Baylor was 4-3, but that's a Baylor team that's a really good offense. And from a defensive standpoint for Cincinnati, I thought it was going to be a shootout. But that Cincinnati defense held its own there. Corleone up the middle, kind of stabilizing things. He did a tremendous job. This UC team, game day going to be at Utah, by the way. We're going to be talking a lot of UC football here on Thursday and Friday. Maybe we'll get Hudson Klauke back on the show. He did a tremendous job. But going to start talking about UC a little bit more. I have BYU just barely on the outside looking in here at this point. And then Tennessee. People are kind of not talking about Tennessee because it's like, oh, they have 2 losses. Well, who did they lose to? Alabama and Georgia. In my opinion, 2 top 5 teams in the country. We'll get to them in a second. Tennessee beat the doors off of Kentucky on the road. I get Kentucky's not a very good team, but, Texas probably isn't a very good team either, but that was an overtime game, right? And that was no issue for Hypo, Aguilar, and those boys in Tennessee. Tennessee's still a threat in this thing, and tough for them. They have 2 losses here at this point. Probably need to run the table to get in, but Tennessee, still a really good football team. At number 10, I have Georgia Tech. I was kind of going back and forth between BYU and Georgia Tech here at this spot. I thought Georgia Tech was a little bit, borderline fraudulent. They, of course, have a perfect record there as well in the ACC. They beat Clemson. That's kind of their signature win here this year. But Clemson, of course, has kind of had a disastrous season here to this point. Last week, I had Georgia Tech at 9. The AP poll has them at 8. But I'm dropping them down 1 slot to number 10. I'll tell you why in a second. They beat the crud out of Syracuse 41-16. Syracuse not that good of a team, obviously. I understand that. But Haynes King, what he's been able to do offensively, he just wills his team to victory. Reminds me in a lot of ways of Diego Pavia. We'll talk about him in Vanderbilt here in a second. But he does a tremendous job. He's tough, and that toughness kind of reverberates throughout the entirety of his football team, in my opinion. And Brent Key, I think the world of him. With all these jobs coming open, not going to surprise me. In fact, I would be shocked if Brent Key is still the coach at Georgia Tech next year. I don't know if they're in a spot as far as their university, their athletic department, the resources they have to give him the contract that he deserves in order to keep him at Georgia Tech. I think he's going to be on to a bigger job here at this point, but really impressed. I didn't think they would be undefeated at this far in the year. Can they beat a top 5 team in the country? I don't think so, but they deserve a lot of credit, and they're in my top 10. Notre Dame, I got them at number 9. Again, kind of similar to Tennessee in some ways where it's like, well, they got 2 losses. People are kind of writing them off. I'm not going to do that. Last week I had them at 8. I bumped them down 1 slot to number 9. The AP poll has them at 12. They didn't play a game. They were idle last week. But it's the Notre Dame team. That's a good football team. CJ Carr, what he's doing at the quarterback position is tremendous. Talk about all these jobs coming open. We've done our replacements videos here on the show detailing, Penn State, LSU, Florida, right? Could the Wisconsin job open up? Could the Florida State job open up? Certainly real possibilities here as it relates to that. And Marcus Freeman going to be a guy that is sought after, and we'll see if Notre Dame can do what it takes to keep him where he is right now. I think Notre Dame's going to run the table. I think they're going to be one of the 12 teams that make the college football playoff. Didn't play last week. Have them at number 9 here in my top 10. At number 8, I have Vanderbilt, and I've said on this show previously, I think Vanderbilt is for real. They're a top 10 team in the country. Now, offensively, they sputtered a little bit against Missouri. That's a solid Missouri defense, right? SEC defense only won that game 17-10 at home, but it is another win. The AP poll has them at 9. I'm a little bit higher. I got them at 8, but I did dock them down one spot because it was a little bit of a lackluster performance there for Vandy. Diego Pavia is a tremendous college football quarterback. Is he going to be an NFL guy? Absolutely not. And, he's hitting the Heisman pose, doing things like that. That ain't going to happen either. All right, but he is a tremendous quarterback. And similar to what I said about Haynes King, is that kind of his toughness and his personality kind of just bleeds throughout the entirety of the team. He wills his team to victory. Same thing in Nashville with Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt. 7, I got Ole Miss. We'll see how long they have their head coach. Kind of feels like it's his last year with all these big-time jobs opening up and not a ton of top candidates there, right? It seems like every, open job has Lane Kiffin as their top guy. Would be a surprise if ultimately he stayed in Oxford beyond this year. Last week I had him at 10. I didn't fully trust him, but honestly, my takeaway from the Oklahoma game on the road is Oklahoma the same team they were early in the year. No, Mateer's banged up, coming off the hand surgery. I understand that, but that's a prolific offense there for Oklahoma. They've kind of settled in as Trinidad Chambliss is kind of their guy, their trigger man. He's done a nice job, and they've been able to hang in there defensively, and that's really been the knock on Kiffin his time here in Ole Miss is like, yeah, you got a prolific offense, but what are you going to do on defense? Defense is better than it has been in years past. 8-point victory in Norman last week. It's a big-time win as far as I'm concerned. I'm a little bit higher on Ole Miss than I was going into last week. Got the Rebels at number 7. 6, I got Oregon, dropping them down a little bit. I had them at 4 last week. The AP poll has them actually right here at number 6. They beat Wisconsin only 21-7. As I alluded to, I know Fickle just signed an extension. But I'd be moving off Luke Fickell, to be completely honest with you. I mean, just a disaster. I think they've lost 6 games in a row. They can't win in the Big Ten. They can't do anything. They can't run the football. I get they've had issues keeping their quarterback healthy, and that's a problem. And you hear stories about Fickell just not being a likable guy, and I think that plays into this a little bit there as well. But perfect example, Zach Taylor. He's still here in Cincinnati. A lot of other organizations would have moved off him. I understand the Bengals operate a lot different than every other organization in the NFL, but he's a nice guy. He's a great guy. He says all the right things all the time. You look at the opposite side of that spectrum. What happened to Brian Kelly? Right when things got dark, right when things got ugly, he's gone. Why? Because he's just not a nice guy, and that's a very nice way of me saying that, by the way. Brian Kelly's kind of just a horrible human being, and he's gone. Don't have that, or that kind of aligns as well with Luke Fickell as it relates to the Wisconsin job. But regardless, 21-7 win for Oregon at home. The weather was a mess in that game. Dante Moore left. Probably could have came back if, it was a bigger game against a bigger opponent. But I'm a little bit, down on Oregon a little bit. It's just because Wisconsin's so bad. But again, the weather was awful. Couldn't really throw the ball. They ran the ball for over 200 yards in the game. If there's one thing that Wisconsin can do, it's slow down the run. So Oregon's still very much a threat in this thing, but had to dock them down a couple of spots. 5, I got Georgia. Last week I had them at 5 as well. The AP poll has them at 5. They did not play a game last week. Kirby Smart's best coach in the country, and they're going to have some opportunities to prove this here, but I very much view them as a national title threat. At number 4, I have Texas A&M. And, I was high on Texas A&M early, and then I kind of backed off on them a little bit the past couple of weeks. The Arkansas game concerned me a little bit as it relates to their performance. Last week I had them at 6. The AP poll has them up at 3. I've got them at 4. They beat LSU 49-25, and I understand LSU was a mess, but going into Death Valley at night and winning, that's one of the toughest environments in college football, and they did it with flying colors, no problem whatsoever. That offense is clicking completely, and I think, Marcel Reed, I think he has entered into the Heisman conversation here at this point. When I look at the Heisman guys, people throw Mendoza up there. I'm a little bit cooler on Mendoza than others. I think it's Ty Simpson, Julian Sayin, and I'm putting Marcel Reed right into that category right now. They had a great receiving duo with Mario Craver and Concepcion there as well. They can run the football. Some questions there on defense, but Elko's got that ship steering in the right direction, got them at number 4. They're very much a threat in the SEC. They're very much a threat to win the whole shebang. 3, I got Indiana. Last week I had them at 3 as well. The AP poll has them at 2. UCLA, it was kind of a fun game. There were some storylines around it. UCLA was on a heater, right, with new Heisel and Tim Skipper, new coaching staff in place after the just awful start to the year. They were outmatched in this game. That's the thing about Indiana, right? They were kind of a cute story last year, but then it's like, against elite competition, how did they fare against Ohio State? Didn't look good. Notre Dame, they kind of bullied them a little bit there as well. Indiana, that's a real defense. It's a top 5 defense, and they're real in the trenches. They play with physicality. They play with toughness. They are a really, really good football team. It's not the same old Indiana. I think top to bottom, they're probably a better football team collectively than I have than the number 2 team, which I'll get into here in a second. I'll just say it, it's Alabama. I got Bama at 2. I just think the Bama skill guys are a bit of a step above that. And by skill guy, I don't necessarily mean receiver. I mean the quarterback there as well. But Indiana's a real team. Mendoza, people have him as a potential guy that could potentially win the Heisman, potentially be the number 1 overall pick. Some people think he's the real deal. I'm a little bit cooler on him, but I'm more focused on their defense and what they've got going in the trenches. And Cignetti coaching, moving with confidence, doing a tremendous job. Have them at number 3. Bama, I got him at 2. Last week I had him at 2. The AP poll has them at 4. I understand they escaped in South Carolina, in Columbia. That game looked like it could have been lost very easily. They only win it by 7 points. Carolina obviously has been kind of a disaster throughout the course of the season to this point. But it's funny, they've struggled kind of packing the stadium and getting people to stay throughout the entirety of the game, but then just need Alabama to roll in at the 3:30 slot, and they'll fill out the stadium, sell out, raucous environment. Felt like an SEC environment in that game. And the reason why I still have Bama at 2 despite that game is because I think it says a lot about a team when you face adversity and you stare it right in the face and you say, okay, we're going to overcome this. We're going to trust in our best players and our leaders to overcome this. Ty Simpson, who I think is the best quarterback in the country, and going into this week, I think he was the Heisman frontrunner. Maybe he's not anymore. He was bad for 3 quarters, and I don't think this Alabama team is deep enough where they can get away with him not being good. Right? Ohio State can, and I think even Indiana can to some degree. But if Alabama's got Ty Simpson playing average football, they're just a mid football team. Really is the kind of synopsis there. But then he played an incredible fourth quarter. The first 3 quarters he's missing on stuff. That dig route over the middle, that's his favorite route. I've never seen him miss on that in my life. Missed it badly. Would have been a touchdown to Jeremy Bernard. And then the fourth quarter he just came alive. And Ryan Grubb was dialing it up there offensively. DeBoer coaching hard, and they're able to overcome it, get the critical turnover, the strip from Deontay Lawson, and ultimately win that game. So I think some people look at Alabama and say, I view Alabama in a lesser light because they needed a miraculous comeback to beat South Carolina. I actually view them, I actually view them higher than I once did because I think it says a lot about a team to be on the road in that kind of environment, stare adversity right in the face, overcome it, and I think that's something you can build off of throughout the rest of the year. Finally, Ohio State at number 1. Last week I had him at 1. I've had him at 1 all year. AP's got him at 1. They didn't play a game last week. They will continue to not play games, but Ohio State is a class of their own at this point as they have elevated their performance above everybody else in the sport.